Hello, welcome to this week's episode of CXNext Live. As you can see, our studio has changed. LogMeIn, the company I work for, has gone to a full remote work environment. So here from the home studio, the home office, and great to have you here this week. For those of you joining for the first time, this is a weekly series we do focused on customer experience for customer experience experts, people in the world of customer service, customer support, really focus on helping you deliver a better and more consistent customer experience. We talk about strategy around customer experience, real world challenges, focus on things around, things you can do yourself as a practitioner to really deliver a better customer experience. I'm sure many of you are kind of in the thick of things these days, dealing with COVID-19 and many of the challenges around the coronavirus. Certainly our own company, LogMeIn, is facing many of these challenges, both from a contact center continuity perspective, a customer experience perspective, new ways of engaging our customers, but also from an employee perspective. The way our employees are working, the way they're getting information is really, being stress tested currently. And so, we're really here to help. Certainly, we love doing this series kind of from a broad CX perspective, but also we'll make sure we're touching base around areas of COVID-19, mitigation plans, continuity plans, and really, how do you address many of the challenges we're seeing in the world of COVID-19. So we may touch on that a bit today. That's not our main topic of today's content. Just as another shout out, I'm doing a daily post as well, trying to give information out there for all of you that might be looking for, good examples, best practices. There's many organizations that have had a work from home agent organization for many years. So there's a lot of different ways we can, take lessons learned from those that have already done before it. So once again, we'll be providing those over the next few weeks. But we also, there's many things that still need to be running and working. So we also want to make sure we're kind of covering CX at a broad perspective. And we don't want to lose sight of the customer and the customer experience, in all these challenging times. And so this week's episode, I think, is actually very pertinent because one thing that's challenging in the current environment is there's just so much change. We're all dealing with change in regards to our workforce, change in regards to what we're doing with our teams, changes in prioritization. And really, what becomes critically important is how do we manage that change and be a trailblazer, be someone that says, hey, rather than this being a challenge that's hard to overcome, instead, this is really an opportunity. So this is a way for us to create a better customer experience. Oftentimes when change happens, it becomes the forcing function to do things better and in a more novel, unique, or improved way. And so what I think is really important is to, as you're sitting at your desk and you're like, well, what should I do next? And how should I go attack the next problem? I think it often, many times it can feel daunting. It can be like, well, I don't see a clear path towards where I should go. I don't see clarity on how I should attack this problem. And it can become very hard because in often cases, many of your existing processes are broken. Things are not going well. So it becomes, okay, well, what can we do about this and how can we go forward? And what I'm really excited about in today's conversation is we're going to talk about being a trailblazer in the world of CX. How you look to kind of set that path, kind of build that first journey through maybe a complicated environment, and then show the rest of the organization how to move forward. And I think in the current environment, that becomes critical. What should we focus on next? Where are we all trying to go? And what's the best way for us all to get there? And I know it's the narrative we talk about quite a bit in these series. So I want to introduce our guest. I'm really excited for our guest this week. It's Audrey Stone, and she's a CX data analyst at JPMorgan Chase. Obviously, the financial industry is, seeing a lot of challenges and changes in this current environment. And Audrey is a great resource that, can help share some of her insights and findings around, what are they doing at JPMorgan Chase? How do you become more of a change agent, or how do you become that trailblazer in your organization? And she's lived this and can provide a number of insights. So without further ado, Audrey, I want to welcome you, and it's great to have you here on our this week's episode of CXNext Live.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And how are you doing, first of all? I know we had a little bit of a check-in earlier, but how are things going? I know you're also working from home. Where's home for you, and how's all that going?
Home is Columbus, Ohio for me. And I have to tell you, I know some people don't like it, but I am loving it. No traffic, more time with the family, and, able to actually see out a window and not just cubes as many of us know. So
Yeah, it is really interesting. I live in Boston, and we live like, just inside the city. And it is really interesting of it is so quiet, and it is kind of, once again, we have some nice windows, and it almost feels like we're not in the city because, there's usually a hubbub and a buzz of the city, and, things are so much more quiet. And I'm trying to be thoughtful and reflective on those things, just of like, when do we ever have time in our lives to spend so much time with our family and loved ones, and really kind of hopefully step away from things. So I think that's a very good perspective.
Absolutely. It's, you always have to look at the bright side of things, especially I think my personal life carries over into my professional life before and definitely now, as many of us are probably seeing each other's kids for the first time or pets for the first time. So it's a whole different way of bring yourself to work, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think one other quick point on that is, so much of experiences, whether that's a customer experience or employee experience or just a personal experience, we oftentimes see it through a very small lens. And, our perspective is, someone at work every day, or, an interaction with a brand or whatever else. And what is interesting about this is that, to your point, it really does open up kind of the aperture, or gives us many new lenses on maybe folks we worked with for a long time, or brands we're interacting with, or, a family member that maybe we haven't spent as much time with. So this is an interesting opportunity to get a very different perspective on many things that, maybe we didn't take the time to, or didn't have the opportunity to in our normal day to day.
Absolutely. We're creating that whole human experience at this point in time. So it's not just, that narrow, this is my colleague at work now. It's like, oh, well, I figured out that I like so-and-so, and their kid likes the same thing my kid likes. And it helps to, I think, in this age or this situation with the virus going on, that even though we can't be in physical form with each other, we're able to make different types of connections.
Yeah, absolutely. Very well said. And I think that brings a good transition to kind of our topic today is, looking at things a different way. And to your point, I really like, making the best of it in a challenging time. And so much of customer experience is complicated. It's not a simple, hey, go do this and your customer experience is great. It requires a lot of different stakeholders. It requires, often a different way of looking at things. It's very data driven, but data sometimes can be hard, and data can tell different stories. So I think what I'm excited about talking today is that we have this opportunity to look at things differently and have a different perspective. But with all the noise in the system, it can become hard, and it can become hard to get people bought into where to go. Like, it's like everyone's hearing is alarm bells. Our fight or flight senses, going out of control. And so as a CX professional, it becomes critical to say, okay, well, what should we do about it next? And how do we start to be that trailblazer to set the path forward in a way that's going to get us to a better end state? And so I want to talk first about, from your perspective of what are some of the initial hurdles people run into when it comes to how they look at the problem? Mm-hmm. And what do you think holds people back from maybe taking this more, new novel approach to looking at the world of CX?
So right now is a huge opportunity for us because it's a shift in our culture, and it's a shift in the way that we are working. So it wasn't just sometimes some people work from home. It's now a whole work culture shift, and that affects the employee experience. And when you're talking to people to try to get them to buy into why it's important not to just, oh, we have this problem, let's just solve it, and being so reactive, we need to try to let them know the man hours we can save, the resources we can save if we start to actually do some research and be proactive in regard to the problems that we want to solve, and sometimes solve problems that people didn't even know that they had because it's just the way they've always done things. One of the things that I always tell people is I am not the first person to do this, and I will quote other people and their successes all day long. I am definitely one where you give credit where credit is due. But when you actually do your homework, network with others in the organization, the experience organization, and you have that network and foundational education, people are more bought into you because, maybe you have a certification in customer experience that would be the CCXP behind your name. So you always have to have a little bit of give and take, but you need to be able to not be shy and get out there and meet people.
Yeah, there's a number of things you said that I really like. There's always this thing about innovation versus invention, and like true invention is very hard. There's few things we truly invent that are brand new, but a lot of it is about that innovation of taking what is out there and putting those pieces together to better solve your specific problem.
Absolutely.
And what I like about what you're mentioning is that there's so much expertise, one, inside of our own companies, so people that are close to our customers or close to the problem, or maybe have a set of experiences that are different from your own. And then two, there's such a great network externally. There's great resources out there, CX professional sites, customer experience sites, even sites that are focused on digital and digital transformation. I mean, there's just so many resources out there, and even things like you mentioned about professional certifications that say, hey, I'm a practitioner in this space, and I've kind of done my homework and done my work to really up my game and approach it as a professional. Yeah. And I think that too often we become very focused on the inside the four walls of our building, and we get very caught up in no other business is like ours, we're different, we're unique, when in reality it's often just someone else maybe in a different industry has taken a similar approach, and you can learn quite a bit from them. And I think that's a really important point for folks out there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the thing is, it's all about listening, and asking why. One of the biggest places I always try to start are the folks that are supporting everything, what I call like at the end of the funnel. So those are your call centers. Those are your, some of your sales reps. Those are the people who are on the front lines solving one-off problems every day. They're the ones that can tell you this happens all the time, that happens all the time, this slows me down. And so when you start with your frontlines folks, they can start to give you good insights of where to really start doing some research and proving that ROI to get that buy-in from maybe your C-suite if you haven't gotten that yet, if your culture's not quite there yet.
Yeah, and that's really good advice. There's a term I like to use, in these episodes of, I love lean process and Six Sigma and operational things. And there's a term that was used in the Toyota production process called a Gimbal walk, which means walk to where the person is doing the work, or walk to where the work is being done. And I think that often gets missed because, to your point, there's executives that have priorities and there's business needs. And oftentimes the decision is made kind of, up in a conference room or on the upper floor of the building, when you haven't necessarily walked down to that person doing that frontline work and really seeing where they're struggling. And another common challenge there is that we use metrics that are kind of business as usual. So to your point of, hey, it's all about average handle time, or it's all about, first contact resolution. Mm-hmm. And when things are changing, those metrics may not be the right ones, in the sense of, in the current environment, maybe that the volume's increasing or the type of questions are becoming more complex, or agents weren't trained to handle those kind of questions. And so the signal of average handle time, you might be like, well, agents aren't being as productive, but there's, going back to your whys, there's a root cause as to why. Mm-hmm. The faster you can get to that root cause, the faster you can then set the right course on how to best address it.
Yeah, I'm 100% on root cause analysis because, I've been trying to talk to people about journeys. This is your customer. What is their overall goal? What are they trying to accomplish? And what is it from start to finish, step by step by step? And people make fun of me sometimes because I'm always like, tell me how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Oh, yes. You put peanut butter on one side. No. Tell me, walk to the cabinet, open up the cabinet, get the bread. Step by step. So I think when we understand our customers, or, if you're doing employee experience, it's still the same principles as customer experience. You still have to listen to your employees about how to make the technology or the physical space, whatever it may be, better for them. So I think that if we identify a problem on the front lines and we go backwards to see where it originates from, instead of putting a Band-Aid on it at the end, we'll find ourselves much more successful and even more ROI than just putting that Band-Aid on it.
Yeah, that's great. I couldn't agree with that more. To too often, to your point, they don't get to the actual root cause. It just becomes like, let's go 1 or 2 layers deep, and then they try to make a fix, and in reality, it hasn't addressed the core problem. And oftentimes you're adding more process or new process that isn't helpful. And then therefore you're almost sometimes making the problem worse. And so I very much like the way you've talked about this of let's go down to like, what is the actual journey? What are the actual things that are happening? And I think you can go do that problem by problem. It doesn't have to be like, hey, let's build a giant journey map about everything, but let's say what are the biggest pain points, and then let's go root cause those.
And when you're starting out, you have, it's very, like you said, like it's a very lean process when you're starting out. You're starting with specific touch points until you can build that buy-in and create more resources to start to change from the lean process to a strategic process. Absolutely. And there's no specific time frame. I know people say, it's usually 2 years is what takes a behavioral shift to happen. But from my own experience, especially, here within this firm, if you have one success, that person's going to be like, oh, I find the value in that. So I'm going to start, utilizing your services. And then another person jumps in, and it can grow exponentially if you are able to have those initial, little successes in the lean process, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's great as well. So much of it's like success begets success. We start down a road, people get excited, they get more buy-in, you get more broader organizational buy-in. And to me, like I always talk with our teams here about, a strategy is at the end of the day what you end up doing. You want to define that North Star, you want to define where you want to go, but really your strategy is your actions. And what I like about what you're talking about is, we're starting with small problems that we get to the root cause of. We fix those. We then start to build organizational buy-in, both in the approach. We're about problem solving. We're about root causes. We're about, fixing the core problem. But then also you're building your next round of folks that are going to go push this to other parts of the organization.
Yes.
So I really very much like that iterative approach.
And one thing that I have found is, I've worked for a smaller company and I've worked for a larger company, right? Well, a ginormous company. So you take the smaller company, and I was a team of 3, and then I became a team of 1. So trying to engage and show the value is a little bit more difficult. It's not impossible because you're the one, you're setting up the meetings, you're doing the work and showing, the output as well. And where I am now, there are multiple experienced professionals. And so, like I said before about not being shy, I literally went through a phone book and said, hey, I see that you're an experienced professional. I'd love to meet you. Can you tell me, about your experience here? You can't be shy. You can't be shy. And you can't be a know-it-all. You have to be able to take what you do, which is asking questions, and apply that to yourself as well. You have to learn what's working in the organization because you shouldn't recreate the wheel. Yeah,
that's great advice. And I'm going to touch on that more in a second, but just a quick ID here. For those of you just joining, this is CXNext Live. It's a weekly show we do focused on the world of customer experience. So whether you're watching this at home, or you're working from home, maybe you're out for a run or out for a walk, or you're taking this and watching it after the fact in a recording. This is a weekly series we do that's focused on the world of customer experience, helping define a strategy, identifying challenges and opportunities, and helping real-world practitioners at real-world examples. Joining me this week is Audrey Stone, who's a CX data analyst at JPMorgan Chase. We're just chatting through, in the world of CX, how you can be a trailblazer, how you can identify challenges, how you can move your teams forward. Please feel free to ask questions or comments. We're always excited to have you here live or listening to this after the fact. And Audrey and I were just chatting about how, really what a couple things that are critical to helping move your organization forward from a CX perspective. One of those being really around, getting to frontline folks, identifying their core problems, root causing those problems, and taking an iterative approach. Audrey was also just talking about how you should really look for experts and look for expertise within your own organization or externally. And Audrey, what I really like what you were just chatting about is how you don't want to be the expert. You can't be an expert in everything. Right. And you don't want to portray yourself as an expert in everything because you can then overstep. You can kind of get ahead of your ski tips, and then it can lead to big problems. And in many cases too, by sourcing a broader audience, one, you'll get better buy-in, so you're going to get more people at the table to help, and then they're also going to bring a different perspective to the problem. I think oftentimes we get stuck because we have the same group working on the same problems, and they always kind of come back to the same approach. Now, granted, there might be different versions of that approach, but oftentimes bringing an expert brings a fresh perspective and may change the way you're approaching that problem. And I really like that advice from you of look at your organization, do that networking, whether it's your internal organization or your network on LinkedIn or network of CX professionals, and leverage them as a resource to be better at what you do.
100%. I mean, networking is something that people talk about when, especially they get out of college, trying to get that great first job. I don't think networking ever ends because you can always learn something from somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of things that you touched on. I want to keep kind of guiding our audience forward here a little bit about opportunities around being a trailblazer and setting that better future for CX. You've mentioned, get close to the frontline employees, work on root cause, build your subject matter expertise, look at things like certifications, build your network. Are there other areas that as companies are, now, as someone sitting at their desk now and they're like, all right, the world is changing, I want to figure out what to do next. Are there some other areas that are the right first approach, or, as they're building their plans that you would recommend they think about?
Enlist all of your friends. So what I mean by that is I recognize where I don't have a strong suit, which is, say, design, which is 100% true. So what I do is I get with my coworkers, and when I'm ready, when I have a case study especially, and I want to present that, I always ask them to help me make it better. Nothing is ever going to be perfect, but as Obama said, better is good. I was at the Qualtrics conference last year, so that's always in my head.
Yes.
So
great.
We always want to try to make it just a little bit better and pass that information along. One of my biggest successes is in regard to just bringing awareness to what we do. Those who are in the profession are like, yes, why don't these people get it? We can make such a difference. But if it's not advertised, if it's not seeping into the other folks who are heads down, coding or, talking to the folks day to day, it's not going to make a difference, So I always like to highly publicize Customer Experience Day. And if you're a customer experience professional and you can connect with other folks, if you're the only one in your office, then, reach outside the office, but other folks with inside the office and say, hey, what could we do to make this a fun but educational day and bring awareness to those that, may not otherwise have an opportunity?
Yeah, that's great. The other thing I like about what you mentioned, and this is something I try to do a lot too, is I like to look to other industries and to your point, other functions of, what do they do really well? And so much of life is really the packaging and the storytelling and the way we take what we have and make it very consumable to that audience. And to your point, what an agent looks for is different than what a design person looks for, is different than what an executive looks for. And we don't want to overburden ourselves with the process. So we don't want to be like, all right, well, what does that mean? And, it's kind of start from scratch every time. But there are things we can learn of, okay, well, maybe our executive team cares more about metrics. So how are we aligning our narrative around metrics? Maybe the agent cares more about how's this going to make my life easier. Maybe the design team cares more about, well, by doing this, it's going to simplify our design, or it's going to showcase, your work in a better way. But I think to your comment, it becomes very critical of how are we packaging this in a way that those stakeholders, one, are going to better consume it, but then two, stakeholders that maybe aren't involved with the project can give us better feedback to make the overall output better. And I do like that the more, going back to the original point you made, is the more lenses we have on this, probably the better, in the sense of we're making sure we're packaging it in the right way for those different audiences, but they also give us feedback to make the overall offering better.
Yes. Anytime I'm working with a group who develops a hypothesis for a solution, what I always try to do is have them write their success story or their success communication, so we can make sure that we cross all those T's and dots all those I's for the broader audience, right? So if you do have that executive, but you're also sending it to other levels of employees within the office, everybody can take away one benefit. And if you're telling me that you're creating this, but it's an extra click, and sometimes somebody might go there, and but it's dependent upon this data that's not always as accurate, how can you write me a success story on that, right? So
Yes.
Sometimes you have to really have that balance of asking questions to have the stakeholders come to the realization themselves.
Yeah, there's I always like to look at, going back to your, we've touched on this topic quite a bit, but I think it's good to reinforce. It becomes, you look at other companies that do this really well, and a big best practice at Amazon is they write a press release at the beginning of the project. Most people write a press release at the end because they're like, hey, here's our story, but they do it at the beginning to your point, and I like your word of success story. This is what we want things to look like when we're all done. And then everyone can get an agreement around that and say, yes, we all agree this is the end state. This is where we're all going to. This is the end of the trail. And then we say, okay, well, now we have to figure out what we're going to have to do to get to that point. And it become a really effective way of aligning prioritization, aligning teams, aligning what success actually looks like. And then you can do similar things with that around, beyond just a narrative. You can do it around metrics, and you can do it around ownership, and to your point, you can do it around stakeholders. So how's this going to better our employee? How's it going to better our customer? How's it going to better our processes? And I really like that as a way to get the team to rally and also provide clarity of where we're going, versus just doing it maybe through metrics, or just doing it through a short email that says here's the new project, and then everyone's kind of left to make their own interpretation of what that actually means.
I mean, look, we're all customers of something, right?
Yes.
So I definitely believe in the golden rule. Do for others as you would want somebody to do for you as a customer.
Yes, that's great. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Let me do another quick ID here for those of you that may have joined. This is CXNext Live. It's a weekly series we do focused on the world of customer experience. You may be watching this on your mobile device, watching it at home, as many of us are working from home these days, or watching it after the fact in a recording. We do this series weekly to help you improve your CX strategy, learn best practices from real-world practitioners, and also love to hear from you on where you'd love to learn more about customer experience. Many of us are changing the way we work, enabling remote support, remote work, changing the way we engage with our customers. So we're here to dig into those topics and help you get a better understanding and learn from real-world practitioners in the world of customer experience. Joining this week is Audrey Stone. She is the CX Data Analyst for JPMorgan Chase. Audrey and I have been talking about a lot of different areas around being a trailblazer in CX, how you start that journey, who you should have with you on the journey, how you set up success. We were just chatting about creating a success document that highlights a success story, to use Audrey's term, that defines really where do we want to go and what's it going to look like when we get there. And I think that's a great way to organize your teams. Audrey, one thing I want to spend a little more time on, because we do get a pretty diverse audience on this series, is you've worked at small companies and now you work at one of the largest companies on the planet. What are some differences you see between those two? You mentioned some things about the size of teams and the number of internal experts, but I'm wondering if there's some other ahas you've had in your career being at smaller companies versus larger companies.
Absolutely. With a smaller company, I did find myself doing broader research. So we had not only the employees that I was helping with, but we had folks that we were like business to business customers, and then we actually had our external customers. So I was working with everybody, and everybody loves to survey. So that's a lot of what I was doing. Surveying is fine, but I like to talk to people, obviously. So
Yes.
So what I've been able to do at a larger company is really focus and hone in on a specific area. So, we're focusing on technology for our employees. So it's really that, the 1/3 of the tripod of employee experience is what I'm able to really focus on. And that leads me to not so much become a subject matter expert, but even more understand who we're building things for. And since I'm not an expert in technology by any means, I'm able to talk to the people who are extremely technical and have them break things down for me into layman's terms to where a general employee could understand. And so you have more freedom to do the research in the format that you find optimal, to get the information, to build the best products, to create the better business decisions. So it's a little bit easier to get that buy-in. And you, with a smaller company, it's like I'm trying to get buy-in. It's like, boom, here at the C-suite.
Yes.
With a larger company, it's, you don't have to go all the way up to the levels, even though there is a culture of experience where I currently am.
Yeah, I like that, and it's actually interesting too, as folks in their own career. I worked at Intel for many years. LogMeIn when I started was a few hundred employees, and now we're multiple thousand employees. So I've been on kind of both sides of it as well, and it is interesting that one, as you're either continuing to evolve your CX career or you're thinking about your next step, there is a big difference between smaller companies, and you're gonna have a much bigger breadth of work, but
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it can feel like you're always kind of fighting a fire at a smaller company, in that you have lots of things to do, and then it becomes prioritization and what has the biggest impact, and how does leadership look at your role in regards to other roles, because your CX team is probably small and they expect a lot out of you. Whereas in a large organization, there is typically more structure, and sometimes you can not always get more things done, but you can sometimes feel the impact more because you can be more focused on the work. So to your point,
100%.
you're really laser focused on the employee, and so your stakeholder set is smaller. You can really kind of hone in on that specific problem, and it can feel good because you're like, hey, I'm really making big change in this area. Now it's still a big area because obviously JPMorgan Chase has a lot of employees. But it is something interesting to think about. Now, it also still has challenges around prioritization because obviously there's lots of things you can do. So
Yes.
I think someone out there, it's one good thing to consider of, what do I like? Do I like lots of breadth and kind of diving into lots of different areas, but then balancing that from a strategy versus doing perspective, and also balancing on where am I going to spend my time versus a large organization where you may have more resources, you may have more focus, but do you want to dig in and become an expert in that specific area?
Yeah, and I also believe in the ripple effect. What we do in technology helps culture. It affects,
Yeah.
it affects the physical space. I mean, you remember when computers, the big boxy things that we used to have versus the flat, large flat screens we have now, or our mobiles at home. And then how we are as employees affects how we treat our customers. So it's all one big cycle, and that's working in the larger firm. That's what I appreciate about the other experienced professionals here.
Yeah, that's great. And your point is really well taken. Of there are many macro effects that impact the employee experience, the customer experience, and those can be positive or negative. And in some cases, they're great. It's like I have a home office here, and I'm just as productive here as I would be if I was in my office at work. In some cases, more productive. And so, but at the same time, change is hard, and keeping up with the change, and employee expectations and customer expectations are more demanding than ever. Because people, live their personal life and they have certain expectations there, and they bring those to work. So I think that does become critically important, of taking those kind of broader shifts and making them an advantage, not an additional challenge, and doing that in, once again, to your point, in an iterative way. So you're kind of going back to the root cause problem, looking for the next opportunity, and then getting people bought in on this better future state.
And if you're lucky enough, to have occupational change management and continuous improvement where you work, then there's a nice handoff, in
Yes.
regard to, okay, here's the change that you're going to make. Hey, OCM, this is, the research we've done. So OCM can say, here's the positives of why this is going to happen. So I can utilize this in my ADCAR plan to get everything out there. And then once the change is out there, the continuous improvement group can kind of take over that for you. But honestly, most places don't have those three groups. It's kind of just understood, and it usually lies within the experience group.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that's something else we could probably spend an hour on this topic as well, but just organizational structure. But so much of what you're talking about really resonates with me of, because customer experience and employee experience in these areas are pervasive. The customer experience is everybody's job. But it can't be everyone's job, because then it's no one's job. And so I think what also becomes really important as you become a trailblazer and you're starting to really drive the organization forward is, how do you keep your area of expertise, and how do you, once again, blaze that trail, like set the future state, provide clarity, but then at the same time know when it's the right time to then hand things off and in what way. So much of being productive and highly efficient and effective is about getting everyone on board with moving forward and getting all hands on deck. And I think your point's a very good one of, depending on the size of the organization, think about what are those kind of systemic partners that you need to get bought on board. Is it HR? Is it, an ops organization? Is it, best practices team? But who are those parts of your organization that are going to help take this from being an idea and a 2-week sprint pet project into something that sticks and is repeatable at scale? So, hey, we're gonna test this and pilot it with one contact center or with one set of employees or in one website. But then once we know it works, all right, now how do we figure out how we can replicate that everywhere?
Yes, and being best friends with other shared services, right? So
Yes.
Communications, and if you're able to work with your other shared services partners in regard to the handoff, then your customer, really, honestly, who you're working for, is going to understand, okay, this communication went out and now I talked to this person. And there can be a warm transfer between the shared services folks. So that
Yes.
can help, facilitate or make the adoption of that even faster.
Yeah, and I like that as well. And then going back to your earlier point, and then also you then leverage their expertise. So, oftentimes with an MVP or a pilot or some validation of a hypothesis. So, hey, we think this is the root cause problem. We think this will make it better. Let's test it and learn. You do that kind of with duct tape and clamps, and you kind of do it cheap and dirty and quick to learn. But then you say, okay, now we need to operationalize this, and that's where their expertise can be so powerful, because they know the tools and the process and everything else. Now you don't want to get lost in that. So I think you still need to go back to your point of defining your success, defining the outcome you want, but they're going to bring all that expertise to you. That's then going to make it repeatable and scalable and trackable and all the things we need to really run a good process. And I think they can become really valuable in that regard as well.
For sure. And, the best way that I've been able to work with my fellow team is, as a CX focused person, I'm not so much focused on that individual touch point as much as, you would think, especially for technology, like a user experience person would be, right? I'm interested in not only that, but how does that fit in the rest of the person's day? Does that fit in regard to when they come in and sit down at their desk and they have to utilize this, or is it something physical that they have to carry around with them all the time? And so you're thinking about when they go to lunch, when they go to the restroom, and things like that. But that's really my job, is the umbrella. Like, how does it fit into everything else? But if there is no UX team, then you have to understand not only those individual touch points, but also the umbrella. So it can be daunting. It can be overwhelming, which is, like you said, the prioritization. I think if there's any low-hanging fruit after you've gotten buy-in, you should definitely do that. But if there's any amazing case study that you can do to get that initial buy-in, that would be the number one focus.
Yeah, that's great. There's a kind of parallel I like to think about of like an editor-in-chief of a newspaper or, a publication, the CX person very much is like that. It's about what's the overall, we have all these things we need to do. We have all these different stories and sections and expertise, but how do we bring that all together and know that, and obviously this is not so much relevant these days, but know that the paper is going to get printed. And your job as a CX person is not to write every story and to, own every piece of content and to print the paper and to ship it on the truck. Your job is to make sure that the paper tells that story in the right way, and is packaged in a way that makes it highly consumable and interesting and rewarding to the person who's going to use it, whether that be the customer or the employee. And I think that also becomes critically important. Of you shouldn't be doing everything, but your job is to make sure all that story is cohesive and that the way they're going to consume it and use it works for them, versus working for the person that's writing the article or implementing the new tool or managing the back end process.
Absolutely. And I take that same approach anytime that I'm delivering a message from a survey. I tell the story with the data. I don't just go over question by question, because if you look at one data point, it may skew your thought based on what the subsequent questions are telling you and the full picture of everything.
Yeah, that's something we talk about a lot in this series, is that, data's great and you need to track things because you need to ground things in, fact and look at how things are going through a metrics-based approach. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, often the trend line and the narrative around it is more critical than the number itself. A snapshot in time is fine. And we should provide context to that, and we shouldn't, hide the numbers. But at the same time, often, we need to provide context around them and also look at where are they going over time and is that what we want? So,
100% agree.
Maybe we're saying, hey, we want to keep CSAT similar, or, we want a slight increase in NPS, but really our goal is not to, get a 5-point jump in NPS. We rather want to improve employee NPS, or we want to improve our SLAs, or we want to manage cost, or whatever those things are, and we know that there's a network effect of factors. These are all interconnected, and therefore we're going to watch those numbers, but where they go over time is more important to us than what they look like on Monday.
Absolutely 100% agree with that.
That's great. Well, Audrey, I really enjoyed our time together today. For those of you that maybe joined a little bit late, we were covering really being a trailblazer in the world of CX. Audrey works for JPMorgan Chase and shared a lot of great examples around how do you start down this journey, getting close to frontline employees, really root causing their challenges, what are the problems they're seeing, leveraging your internal and external network to learn, share your challenges, capture other best practices. We talked about some differences between small companies and large companies. And then we talked about kind of how you shape a success story and how you define where you all want to go and how you should get there. And then what's the right way to keep your stakeholders involved throughout? How do you make sure they're bought in? How do you provide a narrative on your success that really helps them to learn and understand and buy in further? So Audrey, I really enjoyed our conversation. Obviously you have a real passion for customer experience. And I know working in a large company like JPMorgan Chase can oftentimes, be a navigating experience unto itself. And I think you shedding light to that is really valuable.
Thank you so much. I do. I love what I do, and I'm blessed for that. So I wish the same for everybody else. And anytime, I tell people, just think about your experiences, especially if you're in this area or a person creating experiences for others.
Yeah, that's great. Very good advice. And I want to thank you for joining. For all of you out there that are maybe going through your own significant change management around COVID-19, enabling employees to work from home, dealing with a variety of new challenges. I think much of this advice is sage advice of stay focused, tackle one problem at a time, try to build an organizational buy-in, find those experts internally and externally to help you on that journey, and then start again and go after the next problem. And it's the little things that matter. So don't feel like you have to do it all tomorrow. Go solve what you think is the biggest challenge right now, do it with a data-driven approach, and then rinse and repeat. And I want to thank Audrey for joining. Really appreciate it. We'll do a quick blog post with additional information. If there's anything else you want to share, feel free. But certainly it's been a great conversation with you today.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And thank you for all that have joined live. Thank you for those that are maybe watching this after the fact. This is CXNext Live, our weekly series focused on the world of customer experience. I'm also doing daily posts around COVID-19 and response from a CX perspective. So please feel free to check out those as well. A couple other quick things from a Log Me In perspective. We've also built out an FAQ widget that you can rapidly deploy to your own websites, employee-facing or customer-facing, to quickly answer questions around your policies, procedures. So we'll post some information about that in our blog summary, and I'll post it as a comment in this recording. We'll once again be doing frequent updates, as Log Me In, where we're here to help. We have an emergency remote work kit. We have a lot of solutions around remote support, IT support, customer engagement. So we're really here to help you through this challenging time. If there's topics you want us to deep dive into in this weekly series, please feel free to shoot me a note in social or our team. And obviously, we'll be back every week with more detail. We were planning on doing a COVID deep dive last week. We'll be pushing that to next week. And once again, we'll be here to help you along the way. So thank you so much for joining. I wish you all a lot of health and safety. Please take care of yourselves. And we're certainly here to help in your continued journey in creating a great customer experience and also dealing with these challenging times. Thank you so much for joining. Take care, and we'll talk soon. Bye.